does mean that you have to actually have explicit lines of office and lines of authority and hierarchy and who makes this decision and how those decisions are made. Father Eric, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have anything to say immediately.
Oh, okay.
So can I ask? I didn't see
Am
that.
I intruding on your time?
I'm piggybacking. I'm piggybacking. Just keep going. Everything's
Oh,
good.
okay.
So may I ask? I didn't see the beginning of the stream. I guess a question that I have often, and this will clarify kind of the point of this, because I mean, obviously you're upset, and just I think I'm not a fan of political violence. Obviously, like anytime. I don't know. I've heard people say, like, too bad he missed. That kind of thing just like disgusts me. I don't. It's just incredibly sad. The whole thing is incredibly, incredibly sad to me that this is where we're at. And but to me, it's almost like based on what we know so far, which is not much, besides that somebody took a shot at Trump. I don't like why it feels like everything changed, but I don't feel like what changed. It's like it's all the same thing.
Okay, so let me do a little bit of a recap of things I said. This stuff has been going on for a long time, right? It's not something new. The Trump Hitler thing, like the people have been able to see this coming. What do you expect? What do you expect when you have a major newspaper do something like this? And it's not just a magazine. It's not just the New Republic that did this. MSNBC and CNN have 24/7 for the past 8 years been calling Donald Trump Hitler. What do you expect?
So it's more just like the gaslighting around Trump and saying, he's Hitler or whatever, which are encouraging people to be more and more radical. You're just wanting to very black and white call that out as bad and wrong.
Yes.
It's the recognition of the asymmetrical warfare. And I hate to do this for what's going on in Jerusalem, God bless, but there is an analogous I get it. That's horrible. But there is an analogous way of this. And this is something I had to, I'm just going to do this, man. I don't care. This is something I had to try with my parents, my boomer parents. I had to try to tell them. It is asymmetry, okay? They are open to innovation, change. If you want to go to the farthest extreme, entropy. And I'll just do we. I'm a former deep rightist. I understand that philosophy, though I unplugged from my emotional ties to it. But to understand that I am conscientious, I care about my tradition. I whittled it all the way down to God and family. Let the leftists have every other knob. They can have every other knob of reality. You mess with my God and family, you're going to come for my dead body. Okay, but the point is, it's an asymmetrical warfare. It's not hypocrisy. It is a hierarchy. Okay, when they say deplorables, they mean it. Okay, so the move is to understand that here, because here's the other thing. Do you think, and Lance, you said this earlier, do you think that Lindsey Graham or I don't even know the damn names anymore. I think the only one that I have any respect for is Ron Paul at this point. But do you think any of these R's in name share my values? Do you think I would stand next to them as a man before God to judge what they are giving their life and their beliefs to? You're crazy. You're nuts. So this system of aiming for power, for money, power, and politics. We have jettisoned any idea of a shared normative vision. Okay, so we're already at odds, and then to play this game of are we just going to sit here and chase this power and influence, or are we going to realize, hey, this is a flawed game. This is why I'm here. This is why I was able to play, because I much rather talk, and I hate to do this. I much rather talk to the Grail country folk and the Marks. I much rather try and commune and relate to them as humans than wield the knowledge and investigation that I have in the confidence I have in my political philosophy and my political stance. I much more care about the humans. And to tie this back, and that was the meditation that sparked or that motivated Christian's stream yesterday. It wasn't about it. He was trying, and I get your critique of that, Jacob. I understand that you're saying you're doing a futile mission, but he was trying to say, hey man, let's have one moment to where we can step back, breathe, and say, hey, let's do humanity first.
No, Matthew, it's worse than futile. It's worse than futile. I do want to say I was not intending on stepping on your stream, Father Eric. I'm sorry about that. And I don't want to suck all the air out of the room.
No, I mean the events of yesterday have sucked all the air out of the room, not Jacob's personal oxygen hoarding.
Yeah. Well, and so Matthew, I want to say this. So like Runaway Rascal, who I love to death, one of my favorite people I've met in this little corner, is talking about everyone is playing the same game. Okay, yes, at some level, but no, we are dealing, when we just listed off at the beginning, I'm sorry, what we have seen happen in the cathedral and from the people on, 98% of academia, 90% of the mainstream media, the illegal acts that they've taken across the board, we've talked about, the violence, it's this whole both sidesism is bullshit right now. Like this is total bullshit. And when you say, well, it's all the same, like, I get it, that's cute and that's nice. We actually have something that's in front of us that we know 98% of academia, 98% of mainstream media. We talked about people getting murdered by left-wingers since 2016. We talked about the BLM riots. We've talked about all the stuff that's going on and what we see right now. We've been gaslit and lied to over and over and over. And we have to, at this point, and stand up against this. And if you can't see that the Democrat Party at this point is the one who is, you can see where that alignment comes. You can say, well, how could it be the Democrats? Well, look at what 98% of the journalists are. Look at what 98% of the academia is. Look at who has control. Look at where their power is at this point. Now, again, I get it. Like I've mentioned, Ron Paul. Yes, Ron and Rand Paul. I'd take them for president every day of the week, right? I would take John F. Kennedy Jr. I'm just telling you, somebody that has some integrity. But this whole, it's the same game or whatever. Wake up and see what's happening in front of us.
So one of the streams that I did with Father Eric a while back, I just linked it, is the papal encyclical Mitbrennender Sorge. From 1937, was it, Father? Do you remember?
37, I think it might have been 38, actually.
Yeah, it was around then. It was before 1939. And
they had to smuggle it into Germany, and they read it on the same Sunday from every pulpit in Germany.
And it was the first encyclical ever that the official
it's officially in German.
German. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful line from Mitbrennender Sorge, which says, when now I have to go find it. It says when you're what was it?
I'll you look for it. I've got something that's on my head right now, and it's something I actually observed on Facebook. Am I still coming through here? Still coming through? Okay. You all froze for a second. Or am I the one who's freezing?
We can hear you and see you.
Somebody had prompted a generative AI model to generate a picture of the Blessed Virgin Mary deflecting the bullet away from Trump. And I've seen many such sorts of images there. And I think that's what's kind of concerning me the most is, and you could see the religious fervor on both sides here. It's not just, my Facebook feed's definitely going to trend one way, but it's actually, we're basically on the brink of religious violence here. and one side is, explicitly and maybe more traditionally religious, but the other side is no less human, and there's no less human drives pushing beyond that. And it was really interesting to me, especially because the person who had shared this particular photo was not what I would consider to be an uneducated and unthinking kind of Catholic. It's somebody who is a very thoughtful writer, and but it really kind of captures the mood that you see, especially on older Facebook using people on the right, seeing President Trump, some of them straightforwardly as a messiah, others as a more sophisticated Cyrus style messiah, yeah, that just doesn't bode well, I think, because we're told not to put any trust in princes.
Correct. So I found the line from, and I put a link in my chat. But directly, the highest interests are at stake. With the alternative of spiritual loss, there's but one alternative left, that of heroism. Honestly, this encyclical, and Father Eric and I went through it. It is amazing how it speaks to today. And I highly recommend taking the time to read it today. It's worthwhile, and it's shocking that it is worthwhile, and it's sad that it is worthwhile. But if you care, you should be, and I've said this before, you should be taking a page out of what's his name, Bonhoeffer's playbook. You need to be taking a page out of Mithbrand or Sorga. You need to be taking, because, look, I think we are at a time when it is a moment of heroism. We are seeing actual, and that doesn't mean that we can see, like anybody who says be on the right side of history. I want to be on the right side of history. I would be an idiot. I would be a fool to say that I know which way history will go. All I have is what the prophets tell me. That's all I have, is what the prophets tell me. So I have to walk in that faith. But that faith is a faith in truth and logos and morality and civilization. And what we're seeing right now is not civilization. That's the type of discussion, the political discussions that we're having are just, I'm sorry, if you can't say Joe Biden is not capable of being president of the United States, if you can't honestly say that, and if you are the type of person who compares Donald Trump, who's been president for 4 years, to Hitler, you are not an honest person. You should not be afforded the same respect as a responsible moral adult in our society.
The question is who do we give the authority to kick people out of polite society to? Because that's a very
be a consensus.
Yeah. I mean, democracy is what got us into this situation. Do you really think more democracy is going to get us out of it?
I don't equate democracy with consensus.
Okay.
I think thought leaders, Matthew, you probably muted yourself. I can't hear you. I think consensus requires actual thought leaders, and part of developing a good consensus is recognizing thought leaders who are bad and stupid and silencing them. In terms of saying, "Shut up."
Your right side of history comment was dead on. I think by definition, there's a movement, a faction of our country, of our countrymen, that they, by their name, believe they are headed towards the secular utopian. They are progressing towards the bastardized heavenly Jerusalem that they don't even realize. It's this Whig history. It's this secularized, the moral arc of humanity is heading. It's like, no, the moral arc of a Christianized let me be generous, Judeo-Christianized culture is going to progress. If you think you can just have humanity out for itself and it's going to sit here and have some, noble or righteous trajectory, I think I don't know how much humanity you've entangled with. But so I think there's a rub right there in that. The other side is to say, let's humbly and stumbling, forward, hope that we're aiming for the best. Here's my normative traditions. Here's my beliefs. Let's put it out to this once upon a time liberalized neutral marketplace and let it happen. And that has all been jettisoned to this indignant, zealous, pseudo-religious ideology. That's the name of it. They're playing religion, covering the ball.
So, I've been reading what information is available on the shooter. Both his parents were social workers. Both of them are licensed social workers, which makes me think maybe our idea of having social workers be our secular priests isn't working. Luke, you're muted.
Sorry. I have a question. If this is off track from where you want to go or whatever, just forget about it. But you were just talking about consensus versus democracy, thought leaders, and then who discerns those. And I think that's related to the stream I just did release recently based on what Eric Weinstein was talking about with Terrence Howard and peer review. Because I like a lot that Eric and Brett both say, but I think both of them, like when they talk about religion as a heuristic and all that stuff, it's what they basically are saying are like, there's a lot of just like dumb plebeian people out there that just need this as like a heuristic to operate, and us smart people who know better can just be the thought leaders who really guide them in the truth of what's happening.
That's more Brett than it is Eric.
It is. I agree. But then it makes me think of like the corruption that's within peer review and that whole thing and reproducibility studies. And I think that's related to, sorry, Father Eric, I respect you, but that's related to like the magisterium and the Reformation, and we are the authority, but then the authority got diminished with Gutenberg to everyone because they're like, no, we can read books for ourselves, thank you. And so like, how do these thought leaders, for your consensus, come to light?
Well, I think we have to be willing to elevate thought leaders. We have to be willing to elevate thought leaders. So this is what happens in the Orthodox Jewish community. It is expected that if you have a group of enough to have prayer, right, which is 10 adult males, it is expected that you appoint someone as the leader, right? And it is expected for that person to also be in relationship with somebody else who they respect, right? And to the degree that eventually it gets to there are people who have in a sense nobody above them, right? Which are not there are too many of them. There should only be one. Unfortunately, there's too many of them, but there aren't that many. It's small enough that you can count the rabbis like that. on both hands and both feet, right? It's and that's how it should be, right? In Los Angeles, there are maybe 6-7 rabbis who are what are referred to as poskim, which are it gets translated to English as decisor, right? And that's somebody who has the authority to bind and loosen on earth as in heaven, right? You might recognize that term. And it's all by community assent. There's I don't know how many, probably a couple of 100,000 Orthodox Jews in Los Angeles. I'm just guessing, pulling that out of the air. And those rabbis, most people have no idea who those rabbis are. Vast majority of people don't, but their rabbis know who those rabbis are.
Right. So a couple things that you said in there are communally discerned, relational, based on trust. This has always been one of my struggles and probably major criticisms of politics and big things is I just don't, because of Dunbar and things, I just don't know how you can scale relational knowing and trust at that level. Like it's just
because
really
hard. Because you demand that your leaders also pick leaders. Because you set over yourself somebody you know who is a leader, and you demand that that person also have a leader.
How many times do you get one of those like ultra rabbis being a charlatan?
I am not aware of anybody who was recently disgraced.
What happened though? Did you just see what happened? Luke just exemplified his incredulity.
Oh,
yes,
the hermeneutics of cynicism. Yes,
yes, and so I also want to highlight this notion. You mentioned authority, and I think there's. I hate to be this guy, either, but there's this questioning of authority, which can be, I think, in a certain orientation and proportion, can be valid and proper. But when it's taken to the extreme, you're questioning yourself, right? If we protest the altar, we protest the crown, and now it's just me. Well, I'm an akrasia afflicted human. I'm so set against myself. I don't know what I want sometimes. Okay, so you now put authority into my hands, and so at the top of the hierarchy, there is nowhere else to look. There is no righteous, normative character, archetype, story, wisdom, tradition to participate in. And so what happened to the WASPs? The WASPs said, "Oh, we don't want it. We deny it." They gave it up right when they had an empire, by the way. And so so then we're into this atheistic academia world, and all bets are off at that point. We have lost and we have decoupled from our wisdom tradition. And then at that point, we don't share a normative vision. We don't think there's the good that we are either trying to pursue policy for or avoid policy against. And at that point, we are a different collective. And now maybe soft a force, it may be fifth generational warfare, but the fact is, it may not be explicitly existential enemies, but we are not the civilized courtyard of debate and discussion enemy. Hey, I disagree with you. Let's have it out in a political debate. You are less than human. Oh my gosh, you are deplorable. Oh my gosh, you want to genocide trans people. It's a non-starter at that point.
So Mark said here in the comments, I'm just wondering. So he said, this isn't like a polemic, and this isn't rhetorical, but he said, you don't scale relational knowing, you submit to the hierarchy. It's not hard. It's actually the only way. So then essentially you're just saying things like, the Protestant Reformation and those kinds of inversions are just going to happen because that's what they were doing, and it didn't work because of corruption.
I kind of get what he's saying, though. Go ahead.
I mean, I have to say, to some extent, you have to have faith in it. So there's a tractate of the Talmud called Horayot, which is literally means guidance, and it spends a lot of time talking about, okay, so somebody tells you something. When are you like? Well, first of all, it's supposed to help the person who's guiding others and understanding like when you should and you shouldn't and what you can and what you can't. But it's also there's a lot about uh, okay, so what do I do if this person is um, is um, is acceptable or not? Like, what if I think this person is mistaken, right? And it's complicated. You don't get a tractate of the Talmud on something that, like, I keep on saying this about scripture. If scripture could be summarized in a few lines, it would have been.
Right.
The Bible didn't bother with the Bible, right? God didn't bother with the Bible what he could have written in a few lines. And that's even more so true about the Talmud, right? When like it's a huge discussion, right? And it's not simple things that we can just, oh, this is easy, right? It's not easy. But guess what? Life is not easy. Life is complicated.
And as the representative of a magisterial body here, it is also very complicated. And I think, I mean, the teaching authority of the church and all of that, and that by which divine revelation is handed down and is preserved is a three-legged stool. We would say we've got sacred scripture, the sacred tradition, and the magisterium, which are three unequal parts of the equation. Right? They don't all do the exact same thing. It isn't perfectly balanced. It's actually kind of wildly balanced because one of them is letters on the page, and the other one is impossible to define entirely. The third one is a bunch of Muppets who are alive right now, all being guided by the past. So this idea that subsisting in a hierarchical church, let's say one that's got the pedigree like the Catholic Church, is just a matter of blind obedience is not how it actually works in the real world. You've got good bishops, you've got bad bishops, you've got even at times good popes and bad popes, good priests, bad priests. Everything's all over the place, and we move forward in a much more negotiated way than we do just by the fiat of the people of those at top. One of the things that the 1983 Code of Canon Law really emphasized was the place of consultative bodies inside the church. Explicitly named the College of Cardinals as the Senate of the Bishop, mandated for certain acts that the bishops or would have to consult certain people to hear their opinions, and a few times even needing their consent. So basically, the point about the submission to these hierarchies is that it's never an entirely blind obedience, which you give up your intellect to and become a cog in the machine. At least in the United States, the diocese where I've been at, it's always a living thing that has the properties of living beings and sometimes has the property of being kind of confused. And so I don't see there being any workable alternative to these living, breathing hierarchies. But they're always going to be maintained by imperfect men. But yeah, the Fifth Lateran Council, Luke, was a disaster, and they had the opportunity and the knowledge that they should have done something, and they didn't. So, you can look at that as the great nothing burger in human history, because Reformation might have been avoided if people had gotten serious about reform.
Yeah, no, agreed. So I just want to say one other thing, and then I'll go and just listen or catch up later, because this is technically supposed to be screen-free Sunday for the Thompson household, and I'm getting a pass. So, how did I even know this was going on if it's screen-free Sunday, you may ask? Naughty.
Weak flesh.
So I have a few thoughts in mind that I think are related, but it's kind of like, I think one of the reasons I'm confusing in the corner is because I'll speak against something, but then also say that like embedded within it is our salvation, like Protestantism, for example. And this is a little bit of my Peter Rollins Church of the Contradiction stuff. Or you could just go Old Testament and say what you meant for evil, or even your best of intentions I meant for good. And I think God has a way of redeeming all of our fallenness and brokenness and corruption and even malintentions, and redeeming the world through it. And so I don't know. I guess I would urge those in this relational body that I love to not catastrophize, because maybe there's good things hidden in things that look real bad right now.
Okay. Okay. Yes, we cannot defeat God. All the horrible things we do, God uses for the best. The brothers selling Joseph to Egypt, what they thought for evil, God used for good.
Mm-hmm.
That is no excuse for evil.
No, I agree.
My favorite Bible story.
And it's this type of nihilism of you're catastrophizing. And I'm not catastrophizing. Something really horrible happened to this nation yesterday. Something really horrible happened to this nation yesterday, and by the grace of God, something much, much worse didn't happen. And if you care, this should be an opportunity to take a look and say something needs to change. And I'm saying, and there's a reason why I'm saying this, that what needs to change is we need to be willing to call out those institutions of sense-making supposedly that we have, like the mainstream media and the academia, and frankly, the Democratic Party, which has ceased to function as a party in our political landscape, which are no longer allowing us to be a civilized society. We need to dismantle mainstream media, we need to dismantle academia, and we need to dismantle the Democratic Party.
So here's and maybe, but here's a difference I think between you and I, or me and Mark, is I would say we need heroes. My hero is Franz Jägerstätter. My hero is the one who doesn't stand up and confront and fight evil directly in one-on-one combat, but who I think what wins is forgiveness and loving your enemies. But those are inherently.
I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a much better known name, and he had the guts to try to assassinate Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, and that's between him and God. I wouldn't advocate for it.
There's a needle to be thread here, though, because I agree with you, Luke. But you have to understand, we love philosophy in this corner, right? You have to be able to, and I don't want to sound patronizing. You know how much I admire you, and I know this is going to land. You have to be able to take that premise and try to push it to the furthest extent. And this becomes into, I think, Jacob, some of his wheelhouse of justified war and necessary evil. Father Eric perhaps can help me out with some of this. I think that's St. Augustine. Is that we are not Christ, right? We need to embody Christ. We need to participate in the story. We are not Christ. I cannot I cannot die and rebirth. Okay, if Christendom is stamped out, if Christendom is stamped out on my watch, or because of my failings or negligence, that's on me. That's in and out. Now, I think there perhaps is a larger mystery to Christendom that it our God knows us way back from the grave, right? The Ethiopia. My shtick is the Christians in Ethiopia are going to be fine. But there's a needle to be thread with absolutely love and forgiveness. But when you're being bludgeoned and bludgeoned and bludgeoned, and you're being the game has been totally fractured, and it's not a political game. This is just a power and an abusive game. I think, yeah, I just think there's a need for a balancing of those polls to say, hey man, no, we need to stand up and say, no, this is what we're doing. Maybe we're not right, but this is the silver city on the hill we're aiming for.
Speak truth to power. Jesus was not a popular person. You may have noticed.
Yeah, he said what he did to Caesar, but he also said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, and when you've repented, help the brethren."
So, in terms of the proposed, say, action of, if I'm summarizing this, good night, Luke, the calling out evil at the risk of doing it poorly, of dismantling the mainstream media. Think about, the book that I'm reading right now on my channel, Moby Dick, and thinking about something that we just studied today was one of the sea captains was trying to convert Queequeg the cannibal, and the other one was like, no, you can't convert him. Once he becomes a Christian, he won't be good at killing whales anymore. And there is
Constantine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's this politics is dirty business, and Code of Canon Law actually says that I can't lead it. That as a priest, I could not be a leader in a political party unless my bishop gave me permission. And knowing my bishop and knowing myself, A, I'm not going to ask, and B, he wouldn't give me permission even if I did, because there's just got to be these different levels on these things. And so I don't this is going back to the Franz Jaeger and the Dietrich Bonhoeffer. It's entirely possible that Franz Jaeger, by cultivating a space away from Nazi influence and just kind of that quiet resistance, I don't know his whole story, was what he was supposed to be doing. And, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was doing what he was supposed to be doing. And at these different levels of the church, or we can even expand it quite broadly and say of just men working towards a common end, are actually the way it's supposed to be, rather than assuming that absolutely everybody needs to speak like Jacob does.
Well, I have to say, I don't think one of the reasons I speak the way I do, I would not be happy if my rabbi was wearing this hat. In the synagogues I go to, there's no American flag, there's no Israeli flag, there's no flags. We don't put up flags. That's not where it belongs, right? That doesn't mean that we don't have religious values which inform us as we move into the seculum, right? But at the same time, you have to be willing to call evil evil.
And I'm also thinking of the Book of Revelation, another thing I did a book club on, and just kind of we'll do some Peugeot stuff here, Jacob. Is that okay?
Sure.
Some of the symbolism. The Book of Revelation doesn't just give us one end of the world; it gives us an image of every time the world comes to an end, and that could come on many different levels. And if you haven't noticed, the world ended in 2014, and people who are really sharp started noticing it in 2016. just because these things take a long time to break out. And there's one particular passage where a chasm to hell opens out, and locusts come out and blot out the sun, and they have stinging scorpions' tails that can afflict men for 5.5 months. But it's a very interesting thing that it only inflicts the inhabitants of the earth. And when St. John, I'm going to call him St. John, regardless of what Jacob thinks, when St. John uses the inhabitants of the earth, he only means those who have not accepted the seal of the Lamb, those who are not justified, those whose view of the world is entirely earthly there. And when the scorpion stings you, they're crying out for death, but it's not given to them, right? And when I was reading this, this image of having things flapping in front of your face to the point where you can't see properly, having the sun blotted out so that there isn't any light. One of these aspects of the end of the world is that you can't see properly on account of the lies spewing out from hell, right? And so being able to call that out is, as I think, important, because it's distressing for everybody, but especially for those who don't know the truth yet. They're driven mad by the lies, whereas if you have some orientation towards the good, you could at least know that there's not supposed to be locusts everywhere.
I just want to answer something that Caleb brought up, which is, and everyone is calling each other evil, lol. I have to say, if you always have a simple answer about where evil is, if you always know where evil is without even thinking about it, you're definitely wrong. If it is always me first, that other person is not the problem, then you're definitely wrong.
That's the certitude of the right side of history.
It is. It is a complete abnegation of any sort of actual duty
and discernment, right?
Then you are not religious.
Also, I'll get a little technical here with the Cox. Josh, I feel like Josh, do you have something to say? I'll yield.
Oh no, sorry. I had a comment a long while back, but then we kind of got on something else. But no, you had said if Christianity gets stamped out on my watch, that's on me. Kind of what did you mean by that, or?
I think you said Christendom. Christendom's a little different than Christianity.
Yeah, and I was trying to elaborate a little bit and thread the needle of the. I mean, it's kind of a trope, especially in our discourse over here in the West, of like the doormat Christianity, kind of lay down and just not open arms forgiveness to the point of perhaps self extinguishment. I guess my rub there was that I'm not going to assume that me and my community have the power of Jesus, that I can sit there and take that on and then have the resurrection. That was an archetypical symbol. That was a paradigm shift. That was a kairotic moment that opened up the realm of the human experience, and is beyond my understanding what rebirth and resurrection means. But I would say I'm more, and like I said, man, I'm Mr. Biblically illiterate, so please correct me or take this with a grain of salt. But I think there's the notion of the St. Augustine, the justified war, this necessary evil, that you can protect yourself. A Christian entity is allowed to stand up and say, not judge this world, but discern and stand for their values. Is probably as gently as I like to put it.
So Roderick says, and it's hilarious. So is every participant in TLC or the Peterson sphere required to vote Republican? And is this a salvation issue? First of all, it's not a salvation issue. It's not a salvation issue. But if you vote for Biden, you're a bad person.
Oh, really? I am. Oh, didn't you just make the point that if you know where evil is unequivocally, you always know where it is. If there's never a time for war, if there's never a time to kill, if you have
an ideological set thing of no, it's always
Okay.
me who's at fault.
Stand by an infallible
not even
heuristic.
thinking. You're not thinking.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You're looking for easy, lazy cognitive fluency
Yeah.
to categorize. Oh, these are bad. These are bad. These are bad. And you're not wisely discerning. You're not dramatically discerning. Life is much.
You're
more
not
complex.
actually engaging with the
Right.
complexity of the
I-
world.
Completely agree, Jacob. Just tell me one thing the good that the woke have done.
Who?
The woke.
They've broadened the horizon of
Right.
compassion.
If you actually listened to me, you would know
Oh yeah.
that I constantly say the way to defeat the woke is to actually listen to the points that they have in the criticisms that they make. I've always said that. The
Okay.
reason they exist is because we don't actually take the time, right? If the Republicans were actually taking the time to make sure that Black Americans were equally part of our politics, then they wouldn't be voting Democratic 95% of the time. And thank God for Donald Trump, they're not anymore. Right? If we were taking care of education, one of the things I've always said about affirmative action, right? And I remember being like 20 years ago saying there are children who are being born today that are going to need affirmative action to get into college. And there's no reason why a Black child being born today, and I said this 20 years ago, should need affirmative action to go to college. Because if we actually care, we should be taking care of their schooling at kindergarten.
If you scratch even to the surface, it goes to all the middle class African Americans, anyways. That actually dispossessed.
Right. No, I mean this is the
it's
thing.
a totally flawed system.
Woke, there are no intelligent proponents of wokeism. There are zero.
I would
See,
say
I was waiting
if
for
I'm
the
doing my
classics to
best-
come out, but you know,
If I'm doing my
I was
best,
waiting for the classics to come out.
Please point me to one intelligent person who's willing to defend woke.
I'm not going to defend. I would say if I'm going to stretch my cognition and my beliefs, they're broadening compassion, right? I'm going to do the Joe Rogan move. They're trying to make the youth a totally more compassionate, collective, distributed cognition. And I think even that, the philosopher in me wants to temper that, right? Compassion can be the edible mother. It can devour that which you cherish. And I think we're actually living through a lot of that. I think some of that affirmative action is an example of it. I could do a little bit of a pivot here and try and because I don't know how many are kind of pushing back on this narrative, and you understand I'm in a lot of agreement here, but where I went on my journey, I could ask you, Jacob, do you identify as a conservative or are you more on?
So this is the funny part. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I thought of myself as a conservative. I thought of myself as a conservative Republican.
What are you conserving?
Well, that's the thing. Like I thought American values, right?
Liberalism.
And I found out. I found out that it's just that there's craziness in Los Angeles, and that I'm not a conservative at all. It's just that I live in Los Angeles.
You still would identify with liberalism then, in many regards.
I mean, politically, yeah, I'm a classical liberal. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you think? Do you think that that there's an individual rationalistic Homo economicus within all humans? I don't want to. I'm doing this for more of a devil's advocate. Trust me. I
Look,
very much.
we can get into political philosophy when it comes down to it.
Okay, if you don't want to do this,
No, what?
I said, if this is not the time or place, I just
No,
thought
it's just look. What I think is incredibly important is that we be willing to recognize that we've lost our capacity to be civil, and we have to return to civilization. And if that means a constitutional monarchy, while I don't like constitutional monarchy, right? I'm not a proponent of constitutional monarchy. It's civilization. What I cannot and will not abide is the cultural revolution that the woke are trying to impose on us.
I'm 1,000% agreement with you. I go with de Juvenal and Aristotle. Government should be of the time and people. I am not a democracy worshiper. In fact, I go down the school of thought of highly critiquing democracy. Democracy is for a morally aligned and educated populace. Go read all the quotes of our forefathers that were believing in it at that point. And it was a democratic republic, and it was one of the most educated populace ever, because the Protestants and their biblical literacy were so fundamental. They wanted everybody to be able to read and have literacy.
Yeah, I mean, we're we're at the point where there really isn't really all that much left to conserve, and
Yes.
as the world continues to fracture and break apart, I wish I had better news than this, but things are probably going to get a lot worse before they get better. And on the other end of it, we're going to have to start building something new. It might be that we get to pass through this crisis with our Constitution intact as it is, but we'll see how it goes. I don't live in the future. But I don't see any good candidates for monarch yet. So
No,
I'll take it if anybody's interested. I'll happily be king of America.
the one in the weird corners that I don't give it a lot of attention in my heart to, but just for my political journey, what I see as valid and robust critique and analysis. One of the characters is Thomas Massey. Have you guys heard of this guy? Thomas Massey. Yeah, you should look into Thomas Massey. He's very interesting, very impressive character. But yeah, there's rumblings that if there could be a Caesar, that would be the guy, just because he's got such a FU attitude to the regime. And
Yoav was trying to make this point yesterday at the end of Christian's stream.
The Roman.
Yeah, it's not about the individuals, and it's the people who think that it is about the individuals who make the biggest mistake, right? It's not. It was never about Donald Trump individually. It was never about Hillary Clinton individually, and it's not about Joe Biden individually. It's about the systems that we live in, and if you don't. I mean, Donald Trump, God forbid, could die tomorrow, right? Somebody else would be the Republican nominee. And the people who are voting Republican would generally vote for that person, certainly over Biden.
is systems really the word you want to use there? It seems a little reductionistic and technical. That's all I'm saying. Now, maybe you're trying to speak to a reductionistic and technical world with hardened hearts and deaf ears, and that's fair enough. But
Spirits?
I think there's a both and. It's the systems and it's the orientation. It's the stance. It's the values.
Yeah.
It's the embodied values.
I'll tell you why I would say systems over spirits. Systems are taken over by spirits. I don't yes, there's a spiritual battle that needs to be fought, but the spiritual battle cannot be fought in the political realm. And ultimately, I think right now we're dealing with the political. And I have always tried to be very, very careful to allow the political to be subservient, but but separate to the religious. The 6 days of the week are not the Sabbath. The 6 days of the week serve the Sabbath. The Sabbath intrudes onto the 6 days of the week, but only so much.
Yeah. Because it seems like I remember really noticing this back during the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, and like that's when it became very sharply noticeable to me. It's like there's a great number of people who are just operating in a different world, right? They're living on a different planet, and
well, what makes
I could tell where they were getting their news from, right? Because of their opinions, it was all over Facebook. This was maybe back in the days when Facebook political discourse was at its worst. I wonder if they've changed the algorithms to downplay that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's and that was really disturbing to me, that somebody right next door to me, probably about as educated and as intelligent, would look at the same things and come to the opposite conclusions based on the media they were consuming.
But Father, is that always happen? Like, I feel like that's what's always happening, and that we're actually always. So, what do you think makes up objective reality? So, meaning that me and you both look at the same situation, and because of what we know, at least as I've come into this corner, I've gotten, a lot, or very familiar, somewhat more familiar with Vervaeke's point of view and Jordan's point of view and everybody's point of view. And it seems as though they're all saying we overlay meaning onto the world around us. Meaning that, like, when we, okay, hold on.
It's a very nominalist way of looking at it.
It's a little more like
that is that how else do you explain two people looking at the same thing coming away with two different interpretations of what they just both witnessed, if we are not overlaying the meaning on the objective reality? So two people can actually look at the same thing and come away with two different experiences, literal experiences of what just took place, because the meaning is overlaid. It is not in the thing. It is there. We all, okay, right? The cup is just here. The cup has a meaning to me, but the cup does not have a meaning to the bear, to the rabbit, to the other eyes of the world. The cup only has the meaning to me, right? No. Okay. So, I'm listening.
Okay. You have explained the nominalism. Nominalism doesn't work.
Okay, why?
Why doesn't it work? Because there actually is meaning. Like, you can say that this isn't a cup all you want. And yes, my dog doesn't really think of this as a cup. But the fact is that there is a reality to cupness.
Yeah, no, it's just that the fact that I'm the only one that can recognize cupness.
No, that's not true.
You're going to really say that there's another entity inside this world that can recognize cupness. Dolphin cannot recognize cupness. Octopus cannot recognize cupness. Yeah, but we're talking about you're another human. You're of the same species, so you don't count. What I'm saying is humans are going around the world overlaying meaning on the world. That's how it actually works. But there's no other way it can work.
But hold on. I mean that is the whole point of Adam calls the animals by their name, and that is their name.
That is their name. That is their name. That is as God understand. Like that is the animal's name.
No,
But the animal doesn't know it's.
Stop. This is a conversation that we've had a bunch of times, and frankly,
Right.
unless Father Eric wants to continue it, I don't see much point in arguing it.
The only reason I bring it up is
nominalism has been refuted very clearly.
okay.
Can I just
But
point?
hold on. The only reason I bring it up is that though it may be refuted, or I don't know the history of nominalism. I didn't even know that what I was going to explain was called that, or what I was thinking in my head was called that. It's just that that's how I see it. So the only reason I say that is you were asking, or Father Eric was asking, like, oh, it deeply disturbs me when I'm with my neighbor and me and him both see the same thing and we come away with two totally different experiences, what we both just witnessed. And that is because their worldview is different. Because Father's worldview is based in the reality of God, and the other's man's is not. And so
flaw.
therefore the meaning that they overlay. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Here's the
so
flaw. Here's the flaw.
Chad actually asked a very important question here. What moral code will this new kingdom rest on? And I think that's ultimately the question you're asking. Look, if you believe there is a God, which I do, if you believe there is a God, which I do, you do believe that there is an actual moral code which will assert itself. And yes, is that something that I am even willing to try to impose on someone else? No, it's not. Because that is my faith, that actually how I am seeing the world is as it is. And if it is not, then I am sinning. And I am creating a hell for myself. I am not participating in the kingdom of God.
I think there's a way that God created the world and laid it out. And as we recognize that, we are in tune with reality. But there's an entirely different experience you can have of that, and you're in the matrix. Just because you can see through the matrix, because you have your we'll call them God glasses on. If you got your God glasses on and you're seeing that reality that's around you, there are going to be those that don't, and they're to be, I don't know, in my opinion, they're to be felt sorry for.
You're showing your radical Protestantism, whether you know it or not, because what you just articulated. Say again?
I'm actually a Catholic.
Okay, my point still stands. You're showing your radical Protestantism, whether you know it or not, because what you just articulated is that the phenomenon out in the world is just arbitrary. Because you kind of stumbled into my wheelhouse there when you talk about John Vervaeke and meaning. My intellectual hero, very 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 tuned into that narrative and that model. Anyways, and basically what you're saying is that you're swaying from. There's two poles that the modernists sit on. Empirical. I have to see it. I have to verify it. Can I measure it? Can I touch it? Okay. The empiricism. Or this is what I feel. This is the meaning I lay on. This is my intuition. This is where my guts go. The romantic want to express and lay upon the meaning onto the phenomenon, the arbitrary phenomenon. That's not it. That's not it. At least in my opinion. In my opinion, and the cognitive science cutting edge models is no. You are in and of this reality. What that phenomenon is real. Real is also it's
transjective.
What real is transjective, but it's also it's in connection. It's more, things are more real than something else. Okay, there has to be I'm at a loss of words there. Forgive me for that. But the point is the meaning is not just something that we express and lay on, and it's not just something that we observe. Okay, it's not just that we are this blank slate and reality comes and stamps and impresses. We don't express meaning, and reality doesn't impress meaning. We are in and of this thing. We dynamically relate, and so how do you know and how do you navigate that? Well, first of all, you're not this little individual that you believe you are, Mr. Catholic, and obviously I'm being a little bit rough with you on just the rhetoric.
Yes, bro.
Okay.
I cut trees in that. I got a hard hat.
I care and love for this
I'm
community.
okay. My feelings are intact.
There you go. There you go. I care and love for all of this community and its members. I'm just trying to do the
You brother, you can't offend me. You'll be
so
okay.
the point is and I ascribe to the notion we're all Protestants now. I mean, I'll even nitpick Jacob. Jacob has some Protestantism in him too.
Oh,
Yes.
I admit, I confess my Protestantism. May God forgive me.
And I love you for it, brother. And I love you for it, brother. The point is you're not this little individual who gets to express. What you do is you participate in a community and you participate in distributed cognition. And what we have done is we have severed all connections, all social spheres, all relational networks to where it's almost makes sense that no, I am this. I have my own algorithm.
But these aren't even my eyes. These aren't even my eyes. They're the color of my father's eyes, who I understand a lot of the world through. And my mother also imbued a huge amount of my personality into me. The fact that I was raised in a small town, the fact of the generation I was raised in, the fact that I was raised as a Protestant, all these things are a part of what makes up my overlay of meaning on the world. Now, I grew up in a particular culture, and because of that culture, okay, you guys keep wincing when you hear me say that. The reason I do that is that if I'm with another American and there's like, we're surrounded by aliens and me and him see an American flag, we're going to know what that means. They're not, even though we're both living in the objective world. But I'm just saying that there is meaning to objects, and that the meaning is invisible to the objective world. That's all I'm saying.
If there's meaning to the objects, then how do you explicitly and overtly overlay the meaning? You're kind of contradicting yourself there. And what I would say is yes, you are embedded in a culture. You are embodied in a biological entity that brings presuppositions and constraints to that.
Correct.
But you do
Correct.
not.
I was born in the West, so therefore, like with Tom Holland's book, Dominion, right? Yeah. Like that. If you're born in the West. And as far as I understand his argument, that you're basically your worldview is skewed horribly in the direction of Judeo-Christian.
But do you believe it? Do you believe in cultural universals?
What do you mean? I'm not familiar with terms.
So what happens is the way it breaks down is that the way it breaks down is moral relativism is morality is to a culture, normativity is to a species. Like you don't spit in my food or my drink. You don't mess with dead or decaying bodies. You don't commit murder or rape. These are cross-cultural universals and normal. 10
Commandments.
Yeah, you're right. Abraham was right on it.
It's like we all shared a common law at one point in time.
Okay, but how can you say that about the Chinese farmer in the Ming Dynasty? Thousands of years ago. I think at that point you're gesturing at much more cosmic principles.
You've never heard of the Sky Temple or Taoism? You never heard of the Sky Temple or Taoism or Shangdi?
Yeah.
Look up Shangdi. Yeah, look up Shangdi and that. So I mean, you're saying like, how could like?
Okay, but right there, but you're refuting yourself. But you're refuting yourself. How is Shangdi? How are they going to express and overlay meaning similarly? That's
the magic. That's the magic. Is that two Christians who have never met, meaning that they could, and they may not even know that, and they may come from two different religions, but they're both Christians. They can overlay the same meaning on the world and both look at a sinner and not see, or look at a bad. Or I don't know how to put it. I'm trying to reach for. Look at the world with the same eyes, meaning that they're both in. They both have the Spirit of Christ inside them, so they're both seeing the world with the same eyes. That's what I'm trying to. Okay, this is a better way to say it. You guys were talking about systems earlier. Jacob says that systems the spirits take over systems. Humans are systems. We're a conglomerate of systems, right? Well, we can be taken over by spirits, right? So that means that is going to affect the way that we see the world. All I'm saying is that what the original comment that I was responding to was Father had said that I was deeply disturbed by the fact that I could be standing there with another American of my similar age, of my similar, we're neighbors. We have a similar existence, and we're not experiencing the same reality. And I'm saying that distortion is not. He says we're not experiencing the same reality. Well, that's because you both have an extremely different worldview, even though you both live in the West, even though you're both neighbors. You're actually in these hard times, these times when Trump gets shot, or when there's a riot, or when George Floyd died, or when any of these cultural moments of division come. That's when we actually find out who is seeing the world the same as us all along.
So do we actually share a worldview, or do we not?
What's that?
Do we actually share the worldview of the West, or do we not? It's kind of where I feel like
I think that I'm a Westerner, so I have a Western worldview. Like, okay. I mean, I was born with that. I try my best to shake it off in a lot of ways. Like, in some ways, I mean, I don't think being a Westerner and having a Western worldview is, sometimes helpful. And like, I was raised as a fundamentalist. I think that is, heavily impacted the way I viewed the scriptures, which is an Eastern book. As far as I understand, it came from the East.
Yeah,
but
well, I guess, look, I don't want to sit here and pick on you, and I think we're really getting into a weird rabbit hole, and so maybe we need to pull out. But what I would say to you is that there's definitely there's a fragmenting and a individualism of this, uber Protestantism, to where, yeah, we absolutely, we're so fragmented that Father Eric's neighbor probably doesn't see the same, probably is not aligning the meaning to the same phenomenon. But I would not say that is an arbitrary phenomenon, and that everything you bring, that all that matters is what you bring in your worldview in the culture you're embedded in. I think that heavily influences, and it is the presuppositions from where you start. But I think you also there's much more nuance and complexity to it, and especially in the world we are today, where it's my truth. It's my truth. It's like that's the buzzword, right?
You do have like there.
I don't think people actually live out my truth.
No, they don't.
I think the only people I ever might hear speak like that are extremely communally minded, right? They're very aware of the social signals that they're getting from other places. They're very aware of the movement they're a part of. But they're also, trying to be individuals because they've been told that that's possible, even though it's not. It's completely impossible to be an individual, and so they're speaking in a contradiction there.
I agree.
So it's that's what I think kind of makes this moment most dangerous. Actually, is because people think that they're reasonable, that they're rational, that they can have access to objective reality, and they just can't. But they'll be acting with the approbation of their own conscience, doing horrible things because they're good people, obviously, and they wouldn't do bad things. So it's this reality that we keep mentioning, does that actually exist? Meaning that, like, I'm not trying to Jordan Peterson this, like, what do you mean by believe? That's not what I'm trying to do. But it is that, like, the problem seems to be that we can't, like, that the problem is that we're dividing, right? We're ripping apart, and it's coming because you're saying that we're not experiencing the same reality, and so right.
Is there ever an actual reality that is shared?
Yes. Yes. Okay. But only God can see all of it.
That's what I'm getting.
Can see all of it. The only person who can see all of it is God, right?
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity to comprehend even a fly, right? We only have the capacity to work through things mediated. I mean, we're limited in a huge number of ways. First off, we have 70 years or 80 for those of us who are strong, and most of these are emptiness and pain. They pass swiftly and we are gone. We can only exist in a certain place at any given time. We're limited to the information we can get by our senses. We fall asleep. We get easily confused by things. I mean, the number of limitations that we have barreling down on us makes it just makes us so outrageously limited,
yeah, but
to the point where talking about objective.
Look.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch you.
Let me put this to bed. This is not hard. Okay, you're a Muppet. You can't know anything. These people are like, I can know about a fly. You can't know anything about a fly. A fly has so many parts you know nothing about. And like, you come on, we'll do the thing. I guarantee you, almost anything you can list, I can point out something you don't know about it. Anything. Because that's actually not a hard trick. That's not a brag on me. It's just not a hard trick. Like, it's a 3-year-old. Why? Like, you can just ask the question, well, how do the eyes actually work? Right? Well, how does it actually comprehend, the same objects from multiple angles, right? Because eyes are set up that way. Right? Like, so you don't know a fly. You think you know a fly because you know something about a fly. So reality is the fly plus all the other things you know almost nothing about. The hubris to think you know something reasonable about even a fly is off the charts.
But Mark, that's what I'm getting at.
Let me finish the point.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
All the other things you know almost nothing about for real, like just like a fraction of a percent about. The implication there is that in order for you to know even a little bit of reality, right? If there's a quote objective reality, I don't like that term, but if there's a reality, a third thing that is not Matthew's view and not my view, just for simplicity, we'll just do 3 things, okay? It's not Matthew's view, right? It's not my view. There's something else, and we both have access to it, but he's not me and I'm not him. So we don't have the same access to it, right? So in order for us to know something, if it's that much more vast than we are, let's say it's something crazy. Let me just use random terms that make no sense. Like, what if it's all of creation, which we happen to be embedded in, just for a random sort of like way to understand this? The implication is that in order to understand even a tiny amount of reality, you need a cognition that is way bigger than your own. You might talk about that, as Matthew probably will, as a distributed cognition. That is correct, by the way. I am also a Vervaeke guy, even though I've got my differences with John Vervaeke, and he leaves out a lot of important stuff, which is why he's writing letters to Hermes and not going to Catholic Church like a good person would, right? Like, so what that means is you need to participate in this distributed cognition. Well, that sucks. Josh, that sucks, because sometimes the distributed cognition is going to tell me I'm wrong. And you know what sucks more about that? Sometimes when the distributed cognition says that, it's going to be wrong. Oh, no. It's almost like we are imperfect or fallen beings, maybe, right? Living in an imperfect or fallen world, right? And so we just have to deal with that. And yes, mistakes at scale, we'll say higher up the hierarchy, have bigger consequences that are really nasty for the rest of us.
But
I don't know what to tell you. That's the world we have. It's the best.
Oh no, and I completely agree with your assessment and your description of the world. But what I was saying, and you said it, and basically I may have misstated or not said it clearly, but basically what I agree that reality is so complicated. We stand a Muppet like myself, and standing there with my neighbor when we're watching the same thing. It stands almost no chance of being able to actually interpret what just happened.
So don't focus on the reality then, since it's no use to you. It's literally no use to you. It's actually no use to you, right? And look, we can argue about this, but like Einstein's theory of relativity actually comes to the exact same conclusion, by the way. Same conclusion, right? So focus on something higher.
Uniting narrative
is not higher.
A uniting narrative.
A uniting narrative works. A hierarchy that provides you with tools to unite, despite the fact that you cannot see the world the way Matthew and I see it.
But that's what I was saying is that most likely Father, when he saw whatever incident he was describing, when he saw it with his neighbor, most likely Father does have an orientation to the higher, therefore his hierarchy is laid out correctly, and he was able to
that's not relevant, and it doesn't solve a problem, right? Because
it's relevant if
Matthew
you're
just
trying to understand a
refuses to agree
situation.
to the hierarchy. If he just says, look, I'm going to rebel against the hierarchy because Protestantism is in my blood, which I think is part of his argument, actually, right? And I mean, I agree. Like, America has a Protestantism problem. That's 100% true. That's where libertarians come from, right?
We all do.
What happens is we lose the ability to cooperate.
Yes.
Like, I disagree with Matthew about a ton of stuff, but we can cooperate. That's not a problem. If he came over here, he'd probably help me get the damn tree out of my driveway. Would be an issue. Now, we might do that while arguing the points that we disagree on, but the damn tree would be moved.
But that only works if there is okay. So what you've just described is how like men of a different religion, different creed and color can work on a crew together, say a line crew or a road crew, and build things and work in the same direction as long as they have a goal and as long as there's usually another
You don't have to agree to a goal, right?
Yes.
But you don't have to agree on other things that aren't a common goal.
What happens if the goal changes? Meaning that, like, midway through work, if the goal changes, you may not experience the same reality at the same time. And I think that's
going to happen. We don't live in a perfect world.
We're living through that right now.
We still don't live in a perfect world.
We're living through that right now. That was the phenomenon Father Eric felt and lived through. He said, why is my neighbor not seeing the same thing? And what I'm trying to say is it's this fragmentation. It's this total severing of the relational networks. We're not participating in in a line distributed cognition. We are not. I believe we're in a civil war. Culture war is just a modern liberal corporate managerial candy coat of the Civil War. Culture war is just as profound. We're just in fifth generational. They're going to take all your children and they're going to teach them, and you can't do anything. Say something about what they're going to teach, and you're a bigot. Okay, so that's the break. It's not a break in the way we participate in meaning. It's a break in what we have done as a society to fracture and fragment to where, yeah, my neighbor's not seeing the same thing. They're not. They're participating in this weird altered ulterior narrative.
Right.
But at this point, then the wedge has already been driven in, the strike has already been blown, and the log is most likely splitting.
No, none of that is true, Josh. You're combining two things that aren't combined, right? One way to think about culture or society, because they're roughly the same thing. I know there are differences. I don't want to get into that. They're at the same layer of abstraction, roughly speaking, with some small differences that are petty at some level. Okay, those things are the way that we that they are all of the elements of our type of cooperation with each other to know reality, right? And now you're not conflating reality with culture, and now even if culture breaks down, reality doesn't change, right? Like, to some extent.
So this is just a natural next step.
No, look, your culture is successful to the extent it conforms to reality. And I would argue that there's no, we'll say, objective, unchanging reality in the future for sure, right? Because we affect reality to some extent. That has to be true, right? Which means that it's not just our cooperation to a thing that is pre-existent. There is a pre-existent component, which is important, right? But it's our cooperation in continuing to manifest reality using the elements of creation and our cooperation with each other, with the elements of creation, and with virtues and values or higher principles or our religious beliefs, however you want to frame it, because I just said the same thing a bunch of times. Can't, right? That religion that you cooperate in, and you have a religion, whether you believe you do or not, like one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent, right? That is what we're talking about. Like, that is actually all the discussions now. Like, how do we cooperate to conform not just to a pre-existing reality, but continue to conform in a way that we continue as a species? And that's why people sense it as an existential threat when politics goes horribly wrong. Like, in that, Jacob is correct. Like, This is a big deal. I think his political framing is the worst idea ever. But I don't disagree with him in his urgency in trying to resolve the political, because that is wrapped up in resolving this bigger issue of culture and the survival of the species.
And that goes right into Schmidt and political theology. Go ahead.
See you, Josh.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and that ties right into political theology, in that this notion that all is religion. What is it, JP? What you do is religion. Okay, what you do and what you do as the most supreme is religion. And it absolutely, and I want to also re-emphasize is I agree. I totally 180 degree. I used to be where Jacob and I'll throw in Lance where they were, but I'm with you, Mark. That's the misframing. Now, what the weird part is at the level of political analysis, I totally agree with their analysis. But the fact is that's not the top. Yes, that's not the highest level of ontology. We have to understand that it's a value system. It's not a them, it's a us.
Right. Well, and it might be trying to move the dog by wagging the tail.
Yes.
Right. Because this is the brilliant insight that Carl Benjamin and Tim Pool, I don't know if they started it. Basically politics is downstream from culture. Right. But then our argument, Matthew, it sounds like, and I'm pretty sure you've stated this, but if you haven't, you'll correct me, is that culture is downstream from religion. And that's the issue. Right. And that if you don't have a religion, which is an impossible situation, okay, it's Breitbart, sure. I don't know.
The denial of religion.
It's obviously true, right? So if that's true, and we don't all cooperate in a similar enough religion, which is the Protestant American argument, right? That's the thesis that the United States is actually built on. If you just read the founding page, you don't have to read them all. Just read a few pieces of the founding documents. Is that as long as we all believe in God, and God is roughly the Christian-ish God, then everything will work out. Now, I happen to think that that's kind of not entirely correct, but it's close enough that it lasted 250 years, and for a single form of government that remained largely unchanged, that's at least the record since the Roman Empire, so that's not bad, right? And if it falls tomorrow, that would be horrific, but also still not a bad record, right? And we should be grateful about that, right? We should celebrate that and glorify that, because it's a pretty good accomplishment. But then you have to ask yourself, well, what does it mean to fix this if that was the problem, or if that created a problem, or that didn't solve a problem, right? Or didn't solve it well enough. And that's a valid question, but nobody's asking that question, because nobody can stand on the line of good and evil and say, no. We can identify where things are off the rails and call them out, hopefully without calling for the dissolution of institutions that we desperately need. Like, yes, you don't hate journalists enough, right? But the solution to not hating journalists enough is not to bring down the mainstream media. That's the wrong solution. If it's the journalists you hate because the journalists are doing bad things, because the journalists are corrupt, you need to remove the journalists. And it's people like Luke Thompson, and I've met Luke. I love Luke in a deep way. I mean that. I can actually kind of understand what he says half the time, which I think makes me the record holder. No offense, Luke. But look, he's wrong about this. Like, you need boundaries, and you need to be able to remove those people and not redeem them. We're not here to redeem them. We're not here to show them salvation even. That's not what we're here for, man. First of all, you got work to do yourself.
I can do that.
Yeah. Oh, fair. I'm sorry. I met Matthew and I mean, Father, you whatever. We defer to you for sure. But Luke's not here for that, right? And Luke does that. Like, he fights that fight. And look, he believes in that fight, and I get it. And you should fight a fight that you believe in. And for that, like, kudos for that. It's the wrong fight, and it's not his fight, and it's not his ability. And you should not defend people that you cannot do that for. Like, if you can't offer people salvation, you shouldn't defend them. That's not your job, right? You should defend virtues and values. You should defend your beliefs. You should defend the things that are yours and not defend other people unless there's some kind of an alignment with with their behavior to your virtues and values, in which case you're not defending them, you're defending the virtues and values.
That's where I wanted to pick it up. You landed right on it, is the value conversation. And I think, and I hate to do this right now, but this is my nature, so I don't care. You know, I'm the youngest of five. Y'all get it. This is where the TLC and this Jordan Peterson sphere, they do collide. I don't care. I don't care what you say. Give me a second, because it's an aligned attention. That's how any of this stuff began. It's an aligned attention. We're all paying attention to the same thing. We're all valuing the similar ideas. And the idea of this journalist, we need journalism. We absolutely do. We need media. But we need humans that are valuing a similar aim. They're attending to the hierarchy in a similar manner that to
right.
I mean, I'll just do the go ahead.
But Matthew, let's put a couple things to bed, okay?
Oh, yeah.
This little cult, which it has now become, okay? Maybe last week I wouldn't have said that. I can say that confidently now. It has become a cult. There's no question about it. It has become a cult. Okay,
Shouldn't
that's
have even
bad.
said it.
Or more correctly, it's become a bunch of little cults, right? They don't have the same aim. And Jacob said this in the beginning of this very stream.
He did.
It's provable that they don't have the same aim, because they all do the same rejection of Jordan Peterson, and they all reject that. That's how they got here. They all reject it. They are actively rebelling against the principle that you're espousing. I understand that they can't help but be in that box or trapped in the sphere. I get that point, but they are rebelling against it constantly. And it's the people like that, again, I love Luke, but Luke is one of them, who are bringing everything down, right? And look, this is a serious issue for me, right? There was a video made about me being a pedophile, and the person who made it was has some issues by his own admission, right? Not me, right? By his own admission, and he said that correlation that I used to make that video was given to me by somebody else. Oh, well, I wonder where that person came from. Was it somebody they met at Chino, or was it somebody in one of this little cults? I don't know. Obviously,
let me be frank.
It was.
Let me be
I
frank.
don't know
That's
who
not.
it was, but and then they're never going to deal with that. They're never going to clean up their own house, irrespective of how good they are. They're not going to remove the snakes. They've told me this over and over again. I don't know. We know that person's behavior, and we're going to leave them. We're going to let them be. And I'm like, well, they're going to destroy your thing. And they destroyed Bridges of Meaning Discord. Right? Once Joey left, that was the end of that. That thing pretty much blew up, within a month or two. Right? They're going to destroy VanderKlay's Q&As, right? They're going to go to the Vervaeke server and make sure Vervaeke never comes back on Discord, which they successfully did. And these are actually the same people in some cases. I don't know all of them, because there's actually a lot of them, but the unwillingness to draw these borders and these lines and say, no, we have this in common. Like, if you can't say we have this in common, you can't draw those lines. And if you can't draw those lines, the snakes will get you every time. And that's the problem with including those people in a project that they actively disavow being part of, whether they're part of it or not. Because again, like the atheist, I'm not religious. I don't care if you say you're religious. It's not an option for you. But if you rebel constantly, you will destroy Christendom. And we need to point that out. It's the same problem at a different scale. But that's why this little cult is not a good thing. Right. And it's never going to build anything. It's had 6 or 7 years now. It's not built a damn thing, really. It's kind of pathetic to have that long and barely get up a website. I did mine in 15 minutes. I don't know. Right. So that's a problem like that. And that should be an indication of where a problem is.
I hear you. And I think your beef with the framing of TLC, I think, finally landed most squarely in your last little rant. I think there is a tendency to want to let it be ambiguous and formless, and by definition, that means you're inhibiting a form to come about.
Yep.
Now, I think that I'll do the other side of it. Is I think there is also there's the other end of the spectrum of overwilling, of over emanating, of saying this is the thing, this is the structure, these are the walls, and there's a both an immanence and an emergence that have to participate in it, because
Right.
You can't just say this is the thing. These are going to this is how it's going to lay out, because that's not how reality works. It's going to have nuance and contours. Right. But you also can't just say, oh, we're not going to name anything and judge anything and categorize anything and draw any lines. Right. This is just going to be an amorphous spirit. That
right. But Matthew, this is my point about emergence is good. Yes. That whole thing is an emergence is good philosophy. It's not based on being is good, because they won't manifest being. They will manifest emergence all day long. They'll say, relationships, more relationships, more relationships. Guess what? You can have the relationships without this other thing that you can't name. It might be a hint that you can't name it. If you can't name it, was it responsible for the relationship? Or did you just bump into somebody because you were in the same place at the same time? No, sure. The thing we can't name created a conference that we all went to. I've been to a bunch of these conferences. They're fantastic. I meet a bunch of people. I've met more people than any of these other people have, except maybe the people at the top, by the way. So you can claim your expertise all day long, but experience-wise, I win. Sorry. I don't want to pull these cards out, but like forcing my hand, right? Or not you, Matthew, but people are forcing my hand. Like the fact that you made a relationship is not attributable to a nameless thing ever. Emergence exists independent of all other variables, factors, imaginations, fantasies, statements, bad naming. Emergence just happens and people meet, and that's wonderful, right? But if that relationship doesn't result in a manifestation of an institution, a structure, a meaning, an order, then it is limited. That might be fine. Like I might meet somebody and become best friends with them, right? Like I might meet Matthew Parlato, and it might be that we just adore each other for various reasons, despite our disagreements, Matthew, right? And I might be like, look, the next time I'm out where Matthew is, I'm definitely gonna go and have a meal with him. Okay, that's not attributable to this little cult or a nameless, formless thing or anything other than an emergence. An emergence happens without any other factors. Right? The internet is still here. We might have bumped into each other any number of ways. Who knows, right? Like had you been in the Vervaeke meditation live streams, we would have met a lot sooner. For sure, guaranteed. I pretty much more or less built the Vervaeke community, right? By the way, I built that. Sure, it got destroyed by snakes and the Discord server blew up and whatever, but like that's far more building than was done on PVK's server for sure. Now, he has other fruits that are far greater, right? On Joey's Jordan Peterson meetup, there's been weddings, right? There's been children, there's been all kinds of things, and that's wonderful too. But also Joey did that, and not some nameless TLC thing, right? That's the house that Joey built. It's very important to properly identify what happened, where it happened, and why after 6 or 7 years, they still ain't got nothing. Like that, I mean, these are significant factors.
To everybody tuning in on Jacob's channel, I just want to let you know that Mark does this sort of thing often, and his YouTube channel is called Navigating Patterns. And so if you like hearing Mark's opinions coming in fast and hot, then you just go over there and give him a subscribe, and I'm sure he would be he'd be very grateful here. So
this is going to be very whatever. I don't care. I'm going to say it. That pedophile shit that irritates me. I don't appreciate that at all. And whoever that's not acceptable, Mark. That's not acceptable. I don't care how prickly you are, and I think I've reached out to you in different regards. I don't care your the stringent nature of some of your analysis. That's unacceptable.
Well, he's apologized. He's apologized. Okay. He realized the mistake and he apologized, right? Good. But like the force that pointed him in that direction, basically weaponizing a weak person who was not being mentored to, right? I mean, to be fair, he was mentored to at Chino by Father Eric, but not by anybody else. It's kind of weird, you'd think that whatever, right? So that's not good, right? That person was weaponized against me. I didn't do anything to them, certainly, right? I've been nothing but kind to them, which is why they apologized and came on my stream and apologized and been it's fine, right? It's fine. Like these bad things happen, and that's terrible. But also look at what's happening, right? And I don't want to make the move, but like this is the same move that Jacob's talking about with the attempted assassination. It's the same thing. You got to do something about it. You can't just let this stuff go on all the time.
This reminds me of the pervasive and ubiquitous, I think it was called beige Protestantism or beige fundamentalism, and it reminds me of the men without chest quotes, because there's a time.
I'm gonna have to say something. Father Eric wanted to say something, so let Father Eric speak.
Huh? What am I supposed to say?
You started to say something, and now I thought you were going to say something.
Okay, already. Somebody came on my stream a few weeks ago and accused Mark of abusing children and then getting facial reconstruction surgery in order to conceal his past life. And it was a far out there claim. It's false. The number of logical leaps he had to take was truly astounding and something to see. But the guy did actually come on Mark's stream and apologize for that, and you love to see that sort of thing. And yeah. So the whole pedophile reference is not to me. For once, it's not me. And that's nice.
You, Father.
Yeah.
That's tough. The thing I was just trying to harken in is that there is the quote, the men without chest just keeps ringing in my ear, that I don't know if we know what leadership, what manhood. I think we're in a very obscured, refracted kind of realm, and to this is what we know. This is how we see. The great men, the honorable men are of a different generation. To sit there and say, "Hey, man, we're aiming for this." Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to piggyback on that. Who would you describe as a statesman these days?
That's my okay. You're totally down my alley.
Maybe Ron Paul. Maybe Ron Paul was a statesman. Like he's as close as maybe we could have gotten.
When's the last time you heard a politician in America speak about family?
Right.
And
Which is the smallest unit.
Shameful.
That's the smallest unit, as we have discussed.
Not just
before,
according to Mark Lefebvre, but also Catholic social teaching, which I know he didn't read.
That's right. Came to the conclusion independently. It's like none of this is hard, guys. I mean, you can spend your time reading the Bible and stuff and not coming to the conclusions Catholics already laid out, but also and almost all of them are the same as the Orthodox laid out. That might be a hint, but also you could have just read it and accepted it, and then we'd be further along, which I think is the problem, Matthew, that you're pointing to, is that what we have is a bunch of immature people who are very old in age and very, young in maturity, and you see that reflected in the movies. In the movies, who's saving the world? Kids. But that's not no. Kids don't save the world.
Do you guys remember being 16 years old?
Yeah.
And I'll go further.
I was fine for a 16-year-old, but nobody was going to put me in charge of anything more important than making a blizzard.
When they shouldn't have. Despite the fact that you wanted them to, you needed to be restrained, right, from doing things that you weren't ready for.
I'll go further, and I'm on my edge here, but I'm with loved ones, and this is what we're here for. I think there's the jettisoning of the transcendent. Because here's what I'm trying to say. What affords a man to speak with his chest? What affords a man to stand up and say, no, this is the line. This is what I believe in. Right. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm aiming at the Silver City. Get back behind me and let's go. What happens? And I think it's this jettisoning of the transcendentals. It's the flatland ontology. It's my legacy, my mammon, my power, my money, my influence. And so there is, I will not sacrifice that experience. It's this whole projection, right? It's like
Yep.
the left only projects onto the right because it's the only the realm they inhabit, so they can only
Right.
see that the right must do this. Oh, because that's
Right.
the realm you inhabit. You don't
That's
understand that.
Right, but that's an identification against, and Manuel Post is the expert on this, but that's an identification against, and that's how you can recognize whatever you want to say about critique or whatever nonsense you want to say. That's how you can identify something or someone that cannot ever build anything ever, right? Now, that's the problem. If you identify against and you don't identify for something,
Yes.
then
Rebel
there's a
wisdom.
problem. And that
The rebel
problem
wisdom
is
problem.
you can't cultivate, you can't manifest, you can't protect, and you can't lead. You can't do any of those things. And so
It's standing
people
on
are like,
negation.
right, because it's negation. And the people are like, oh, the negation isn't horrible or whatever, or we can't recognize evil. Look, if something only has the capacity to break something down, that's the only capacity it has, then it's not good. Like,
you're still
you shouldn't identify,
co-identifying.
you go along with it.
And your co-identification, your agent arena relationship is still centered on that. You have
That's
not
right.
seen, you have not looked and aimed at the upward and upward and onward goal that is beyond, and said, "Hey, man, we're gonna
That's
aim
right.
at something better. We're gonna aim at the good,
Well,
the true,
and
the
that's
beautiful."
right. And to your point, that's the solution. And I don't think the problem is like virtues and values have been drained from us or removed or any of that. I think it's a much worse, in some sense, problem, which is we now have a generation and a half, maybe 2 generations of people that don't have the actual skills that their skills haven't been cultivated of the poetic way of knowing, which means they can't understand, or poetic way of informing, actually, which means they can't understand vertical causality at all, which means they can't look up, right? So if I point to something, if anybody has their, and this is the identification against. What are people identifying against when they're talking, when they're just disliking Trump? They're identifying against him putting out his chest, drawing a line, and being a leader. They're identifying against leadership. And then they're going, well, I don't understand what we're leaders. Well, it's because you keep identifying against them. It's not because they're not there.
Well, and I'll even go further. It wasn't even just Trump, right? They called Mitt Romney a racist. That's what spiraled.
Well, it's not just Mitt Romney, and it's not just Republicans. It's strong, say moderate Democrats. I mean,
we go straight white male.
They've gone back and revised history and said, Bill Clinton wasn't that great either. Well, y'all voted for him. I don't know how not great he was if he was a Democratic president that y'all voted for. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking about. But like, it's not that they're identifying against Bill Clinton. They're identifying against strong leaders. And I mean, say what you want about Bill Clinton. I have nothing nice to say about him, but he was at least a strong leader. And now they're retroactively identifying against him, even though he's in their political party. That's why this won't be solved by politics. It's one of the many.
It's also a Luciferian kind of spirit, right? It's kind of my knock on some of the Grail Country stuff is that it's contrarian for the sake of contrarianism.
Exactly.
At some point,
said.
There's a usefulness to contrarianism, but at some point you have to surrender to the logos, brother. At least that's my worldview. That's the tradition I'm participating in.
You can't carry the contrarianism forever, and you can't make it universal,
or for its own sake.
Right, and you can't self-reference. All of these things, I would argue, and I understand if people disagree or they don't see it right away, are viewable. Like, you can just do some quick math and see it, and hopefully on Navigating Patterns, I'm going to have a video where I go over Rene Girard, because Rene Girard is a freaking absolute master at manipulating and self-reference in a way that you don't really notice. And he makes some unbelievably excellent, like, nuclear bomb claims. Like, one of them that I just found absolutely helpful was feminists identify witchcraft as an institution. I was like, oh my goodness, that's such a good frame, right? Unfortunately, Rene Girard's evil, like actually evil. I can prove it, and I will do a video on that at some point. Maybe not even this month, maybe not even next month. I will do a video on that, proving that, because it's actually easy to see once it's pointed out to you. But it's hard to see when you're in the enchantment, because boy, does he do 100,000 points for enchantment, 0 points, all points taken away for evil. That's just how I do my math. You can do your math differently, but like, hey, yeah, I'm still a no on evil. If you're not, that's fine. But I'm still a no on evil, right?
Well, I'll look forward to hearing that, because he is he's just really interesting. It really tickles the intellect, you know.
He does. He
Oh,
has
Corey
some
wants
great
to know
points.
too. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go over his great points on Friday. I'm releasing a video on navigating patterns where I talked to Justin Wells about Girard, because that's what he wanted to discuss. And so I did a bunch of research because that's what he wanted to discuss. And then I found all this stuff, and I'm like, well, this is amazing. And we're probably going to do another talk, because you'll have to comment on that first video that's releasing on Friday, and then Justin and I will do a second video, but because I have a lot more material to go through. But yeah, I mean, this is an important discussion, and this is going to be one of those things. And I've done other videos. I've got a recent one on the trick of socialism where I kind of point out, no, you can spot this stuff. It's not that hard. But if everybody who's standing up like me is just being nothing but attacked, then what do you expect leaders to do? If they're going to get shot at, I mean, maybe they're not going to remove their leadership. They're just going to remove it from you, and then you're going to lose, and they're still going to lead. They're just not going to do it in a way that benefits you anymore. That's not good. That's why you got to support people, even people like Matthew that you disagree with. And I totally support Matthew.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, because I think this is something I was thinking about earlier this week, was people who are in leadership and are doing a good job actually get a lot more than they receive. And I think it was Peugeot at the Symbolic World Summit. He had mentioned something like that. He's like, everybody had gathered around him. He had a bunch of people help him with the logistics, because an event like that does not just happen. You really need to have a whole bunch of people come together. And he was being very gracious about it, but he didn't say what he gave to us. And I think that was probably the right goal, the right thing to do, because it would sound a little self-aggrandizing for him to have actually laid it out, like, here's everything I do for you. And he's, it's like, he's doing good work, but he doesn't bear the heaviest burden we have on this earth, not by a long shot. So anyway.
And that's what's important to recognize. And I do have this, although I can't remember off the top of my head which video it's on. So much for Greek food in the afternoon for me, total nap time. My brain's a little slower than usual. But like I point this out, it's probably my leadership live stream actually. The leader gives to the bottom, right? And the bottom gives up to the top, but it has to be reciprocal, right? And good leadership is. And when it's not reciprocal, that's tyranny for sure. But are you so sure you can identify tyranny that easily? Because leaders make a lot of sacrifices. Like if you've got a family and you're a leader, your family's getting screwed. Like they're getting the bad end of that deal. I mean, that's kind of why maybe priests don't have families, father, right? Because then they can lead larger flocks with fewer distractions and not have a conflict, for example, right? Whatever you may think of celibacy in the priesthood as solving a problem, and that's the problem, is that people don't see that leaders convey protection, which allows nurturing. Right? Leaders convey things to the bottom that the bottom can't have by itself. This decentralization, which is another great point by Rene Girard, oddly, is that when you destroy hierarchy, you get rid of the king. I mean, he actually talks about this, right? You think that you have a clearer path to whatever the king had, right? But actually what you have is many smaller obstacles to that same goal. And so you've just made a trade-off, and it's a terrible one.
This is a stupid tangent, real quick. Girard is the scapegoat.
Mimetic Desire, which is his better work,
give me one book. Can you give me one book so I can? I've heard. I want to look into it.
No, don't do his books. He did a series with David Cayley, and I really like David Cayley, but man, David Cayley does a terrible job here of platforming evil. But go to davidcayley.com, his podcast. And he's got a whole series on Girard from, I want to say it's 2012.
Look into it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this normative vision thing again is coming up to me because there's a faction that doesn't even believe in evil in this country. That is my countrymen. That there's a medicalization of deviancy. It's
not a faction. it's the problem is
it's the main worldview.
If you deny that you're religious, right, and I think that's 68% of the population, there is no way that you can believe in evil. It's not possible because acknowledgement, submission to the idea that you're religious is the only way that you will be able to discern evil, whether you believe in it or not. And so the argument there is you can say you believe in evil and evil is Hitler and Trump is Hitler, or whatever formula you want to use, or Biden's Hitler. It doesn't really matter all day long, right? But if you don't have the discernment because you don't have the tools, because you haven't submitted to a religion, then the fact that you believe in evil isn't even relevant. It's not plausible that you, quote, believe in evil and can't discern it. So if you don't have those discernment tools, you don't believe in evil. And if you're part of that set, which it seems to be the majority, then it's a big problem.
It's right into the wisdom famine, right? The way our society has gone is we've kind of stricken ourselves. It's almost irrelevant, right? The way I would take it is if I mention that to the regular mainstream woke puritanical progressive, they're like, evil's irrelevant. Blah, blah, blah. It's just, they just need to be treated. They just need to be medicalized. They just, that was inflicted upon them, from on high, whatever. So.
Right, and that's the problem. Like, again, we need the distributed cognition to help us to draw the line of evil. And you can say, look, the Inquisition drew some bad lines for evil. First of all, I'm going to question your knowledge of history, right? And second of all, I'm going to say, how freaking often, right? Because, of course, they did. They weren't perfect. But I'm not going to go as far as Girard. Girard actually says the following, and it's in that interview. It's just under 6 hours of total material, but it is recommended. If you want to understand Girard, just listen to him talk. Like he'll tell you, take good notes. But here's what he says, Matthew, which is just so interesting. He says the Inquisition was the first attempt in history at government tyranny. And I was just like, dude, that is such a lie. I mean, I again, brilliant lie, but also what a ridiculous statement. Like, that is so stupid. But he says it, and he uses that to justify a bunch of things, right? And like Scapegoat, he does the I'm just gonna brand it the Luke Thompson approach. He takes the word scapegoat and he starts out explicitly saying a scapegoat is guilty. And by the end of the 6 hours, he says all scapegoats are completely innocent, just like Jesus, and therefore. And he deconstructs Christianity from he's a literary critic. That's where postmodernism actually comes from. That could be a hint as to why he's not good.
Great example it's a great example of focusing what I call humping a doorknob. Excuse me, Father. I'm a blue collar worker. It's a perfect. I'm glad Mark got tickled. It's a perfect example of focusing on a grain of truth and spiraling out, right?
Exactly.
Because and I would also say because you want to understand that yes, there's these there's these symbols at the basis of a culture, of a coalescence of attention, right? But you also you want to construe and have a properly oriented. I mean, this is where the Christian narrative comes in, right? You want the narrative to proceed and process into this fruitful telos enriched vision, right? You can't just say that, because the way I cognize that is that you can sit there and have the grain of truth, and you can spin out on your intellectualism and not put it into the embodied context, into where now
right.
you've totally refuted yourself.
But look, Matthew, think of the advantages, right? You can spin out into the intellectualism and make excuses for all kinds of bad behavior forever. And then you don't have to judge people, which means when they judge you, you can say, I don't judge you, dude. You shouldn't judge me. and then you don't have to be judged, and you don't have to judge, which is a lie, by the way. You do have to judge. You take action in the world. See my live streams on this. I have them, right? It's discernment, judgment, action, right? They're over a year old now, right? But what that means is these people don't want to be judged. And I don't want to be judged. Sounds good to me. Unfortunately, Father Eric judges me all the time.
They won't judge themselves.
He'll take me off his stream. He's done it many times, right? And that's a judgment. Like, Mark, you're going too far. You got to go. And I just submit to that. I don't go, Father Eric's meanie pants to me, and he put me off this. I don't do that. Like, he's probably right. Sometimes I think he's wrong, and I haven't told him that because I don't think it's appropriate. Because what do I know? Like, and it's his stream. Who cares? Like, you submit to the hierarchy. It's not hard.
For me, it also ties into that denial or obfuscation of or equivocation of evil, right? Too, it's this. I don't want to recognize the evil in me. I don't want to recognize the temptation and the sin in me. So therefore, I just table it. That's
you project
that's not,
it out. No, you project it out. I don't want to recognize that in me. So I'm going to it's really just psychological projection. I'm going to project that out and not recognize it in anyone else. And now the world just falls apart. Thanks a lot. No, thank you. I don't stop doing that.
And it's the Solzhenitsyn and Peterson move of actually, and the Christ move. No, you take all the responsibility. All of the flaws of human. You wear all the sins. You put the crown of thorns on me, humiliate me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm innocent. I did only good. I was betrayed, and I'm gonna go do the most excruciating death. That, by the way, the Jews insisted upon. Right, is from the story I've understood. Is they insisted upon crucifixion because they could not crucify.
Corey left. Corey, I got notes on Gerard. Damn it. Reach out to me. I'll tell you the David Cayley stuff is better than the books because it really does reveal, especially if you listen to it continuously, which I know is a real stretch. It really does reveal what Gerard's up to. Peugeot does not like Gerard. Peugeot says, boy, there's something there, but I can't put my finger on it. That's what Peugeot says. And that's what Justin and I talk about. So that's all gonna come out on Friday.
All righty. Well, I'm going to tell you what's going to go down.
I know.
And that's my head on the pillow because it's 9:30 and it's dark outside, and that's when rational creatures go to bed.
Thank you, Father, for staying on late. I know it's late for you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you both. I enjoyed this. And thank you,